Fit their 20th anniversary. So if you'd stand right now for the invocation, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for our residents, businesses, and employees who make this a special place to live, work, and play. We ask your blessing on our police, fire, EMS, and staff as they not only protect us and keep us safe, but provide an unparalleled level of service. Grant us the wisdom to represent all our people well. Help us to have compassion for those that are less fortunate. Bless our nation, the men and women of our armed forces and special forces who give their lives to protect the freedom we cherish. All these things I ask in the name above all names. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, if you could join me down front, please. This is a special recognition tonight for the 20th anniversary of Fort Bend Fit. I'm also going to ask the founders, Tricia Hollick, Bob Tyson, and Keith Cox to come down front.
Only Bob was able to make it tonight.
Okay, only Bob's here? All right. The president of USA Fit, Debbie Mercer. And then last but not least, come on, the rest of y'all come on down. We're going to get a picture, so everybody else come on down.
And we have the head coach.
And we've got,
Gordon.
okay, go ahead.
And we also have the head coach for Fort Bend Fit, for Terry Gorney, which has been
Sure.
the,
Okay.
and also the organizer of the Sugar Land Marathon for 10 years.
And well, don't be shy. There you go. There you go. Just kind of, everybody kind of just move right around there. It's a good-looking group, just like you'd expect. So tonight, and I probably ought to be looking at y'all, tonight we're going to recognize you for 20 years of service to the city of Sugar Land, Fort Bend County, and actually our region. It was established in 1999 by Sugar Land residents Bob Tyson, Trish Hollick, and Keith Cox. Fort Bend Fit is a local chapter of USA Fit, provides a training program designed for walkers and runners, Patty, that's you, of all levels to prepare them in completing 5Ks, 10Ks, half and full marathons. Under the leadership of head coach Terry Gorney, who is a 15-year Sugar Land resident, the organization provides a safe environment for 500 members to achieve their fitness goals over a period of 6 months through their award-winning training program. You're currently preparing to host the 12th annual USA Fit Marathon in Sugar Land on February the 2nd of 2020, next year. This event is also known as Everyone's Marathon, inviting any and all athletes to participate. Careful, you know. And as a qualifying race for the Boston Marathon, well, you're not in any danger of having me running that. For the past 20 years, Fort Bend Fit has brought community members together to support one another and achieve success both on and off the track. Congratulations. And we've got a proclamation for Fort Bend Fit on their 20th anniversary of August 2019. Whereas Fort Bend Fit, founded in June 1999 by a small group of Sugar Land residents, Trish, Keith, and Bob, celebrates 20 years of its award-winning training program. And whereas Fort Bend Fit helps the local runners and walkers train for half marathons and marathons while maintaining healthy lifestyles. Whereas under founding member Terry Gorney's leadership as head coach for 16 years, that's a pretty big commitment. Fort Bend Fit has grown to more than 500 members of all levels of fitness and age training to achieve race condition. And whereas Fort Bend Fit, I don't know why I have trouble with that. Fort Bend Fit will host the 10th annual USA Fit Marathon in Sugar Land, Texas, known as Everybody's Marathon, and is a qualifying race for the Boston Marathon, the world's oldest annual marathon. I didn't know that. Given into my hand as the mayor of Sugar Land. Anybody? You want to say something?
No, I mean, I have the honor actually to be part of this group for 18 years myself.
Well, you were the one that brought it. You were the one that brought it to us, so we want to thank you for doing that. Terry, would you like to say a few words?
I would just like to say thank you so much for this proclamation, and thank you to all of our coaches and members who came out today. We've enjoyed every minute here in Sugar Land, and we run this town.
Council members, if you could stand up and if we could all kind of step back, we're going to get a big photo. A big photo.
All right, great. Everyone up, look up here, please. We're going to take a couple. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. All right, great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Congratulations.
See you.
And you're welcome.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Terry. Oh, yeah, Terry. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, bye.
Haircut too, though.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming. We'll kind of wait till everybody can kind of filter out. Y'all don't want to stay for the rest of the council meeting? Good job, Terry. Good job. Item number 1 is public comment, and this is reserved for anybody that wants to speak on one of the agenda items, unless there's a public hearing. If there's a public hearing, we'd ask that you'd speak at that time. So at this time, we're going to ask anybody on the public comment part. We'll move on to item number 2, review of consent agenda. Item number 3, consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are viewed as being routine business. We'll take all of the items as one motion, unless the council member wants to pull that item. If they pull the item, we'll take that item separate, and we'll take all the other items.
Mayor, I would like to pull item consent agenda item
3B.
3B. All right, we'll go ahead and take items number A and C. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Got a motion by Gandhi, second by McCutcheon.
Jacobson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jacobson. Motion by Jacobson. Second by McCutcheon. Your vote this time, please.
Looks like a Boy Scout in the back.
Yeah, I see. Okay, and it passes 7-0. We'll now take up item number B, 3B, consideration of an action of the City of Sugar Land, resolution number 1930, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, adopting a policy for public comments at City Council, boards, and commission meetings, and repealing resolution number 316. Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Here to answer any questions.
And I know Councilmember Jacobson made an inquiry.
I thought it was a good inquiry relative to this topic. Can you expand on what mechanically are we going to change going forward? I guess I'm still a little unclear about.
Very little mechanically will change,
Okay.
Councilman. They will just be certain boards that traditionally just have a public hearing session.
Like planning and zoning.
Like planning and zoning also has a public comment section, but like zoning board of adjustment, they'll now have not only a public hearing section, but they also have a public comment section. So it'll give the any interested party that wants to come give comments, 3 minutes, just like that's been outlined since 2003, to come and comment about any agenda item.
So, but if you're going to have a public hearing, do you still have an opportunity to speak at public comment as well on that same topic?
Ideally, if you come in for public hearing, you should wait till a public hearing to speak under the public hearing. But again, this is just if some resident wanted to, prime example, come and comment about the minutes on the ZBA agenda item, they could.
Okay.
And so this gives the opportunity, just gives the opportunity for them to comment about anything on the agenda. And again, the public hearing is the time that they would actually speak for the public hearing.
And this is from the state legislature's changes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve.
Got a motion by Councilmember Gandhi, a second by Councilmember Kamali. Umesh, the only other thing I'd mention is we've always had a policy of 10 people for 3 minutes.
Yep.
We've periodically, I've waived that. Now we won't have that 10 limit, so it'll be whoever comes in will be given 3 minutes. That's under the new law.
So it could be unlimited in terms of...
Technically, it could be unlimited, yes, sir. Could be.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, I'm just saying.
So I've got a motion by Councilmember Gandhi, second by Councilmember Kamali. If you'll vote this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Item number 4, contracts and agreements. 4A, consideration of an action on authorizing the execution of a construction contract with Main Industries Limited in the amount of $1,246,675 for the Oyster Creek Siphon Replacement Capital Improvement Plan WW 1804. We've got with us our own Greg Nichols, our project manager. Greg.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present for your consideration the construction contract for WW 1804, the Oyster Creek Siphon Replacement. Some project background. The East Interceptor collects wastewater and flows to the North Wastewater Treatment Plant. The treatment plant is located on Highway 59 here, right in the vicinity of Target. The East Interceptor pretty much collects the whole flow from the northeast quadrant of the city and gets it to the treatment plant. This is a critical gravity sewer line crossing Oyster Creek. There are 2 siphon pipes that cross Oyster Creek in this crossing. One is a 24-inch diameter. It's now in service. There was an 18-inch that was used as a backup. Due to age and condition, it had to be abandoned and is currently out of service. Asset Management Program has identified this abandoned 18-inch pipe as a high priority to be reinstalled for backup of that creek crossing. Project to replace abandoned 18-inch pipe with a new 24-inch pipe as the backup siphon. Continuing background, the project was first bid in February of 2019. We received no bids. And speaking with some of the contractors that do this type of work, the center point overhead power lines were deemed a large concern for them. Due to the depth that we have to go with this crossing underneath the creek, it takes very large pieces of equipment, and there was some concern with the proximity of the lines and operating the large pieces of equipment near those lines. So we approached CenterPoint and got an agreement in place with them to de-energize the span that crosses the creek. They requested the non-peak month of October for us to complete the work, and we've got that agreement already in place. We rebid the project on July 18, 2019. We received 2 bids this time. The scope is to install a new 24-inch siphon pipe by horizontal directional drill. We're going to, once we do the drill underneath the creek, we'll insert the pipe and connect it back to the 2 existing concrete structures on either side of the creek. Those 2 concrete structures will be rehabilitated while we're there with new wall liner. There are 6 bald cypress trees on the south side of the creek that may potentially be in the conflict with the equipment. We're going to do what we can to try to save those 6 trees. If we do have to remove any, we will replace them. This is a project map that kind of shows you where the siphon crosses the creek right there along Highway 59. The upper right-hand corner is kind of the Home Depot area, and the lower left is the Whole Foods area. Okay, contractor selection. The bid was advertised June 26th and July 3rd, 2019. We received 2 bids July 18th. The project budget was $1,360,130. Engineer's estimate was $1 million. The 2 bids were Main Lane Industries Ltd. with the low bid at $1,246,675. BRH Garver Construction LP at $1,413,025. Project budget and schedule. Available budget from utility CIP funds is $1,360,130. The construction contract amount is $1,246,675. We anticipate notice to proceed in September to make that October agreement with CenterPoint. The contract duration is 90 calendar days. That puts substantial completion December 2019. Project impacts and notification. We don't anticipate any service interruptions. This is more of a transmission line, if you will. There are no services that are directly connected to this line. We will have to shut down the siphon crossing just for the connections on both sides. The horizontal directional drilling and all will go in place while the line is still active. Like I said, it will just be shut down when we make the connections on both sides. So the shutdown will be very limited. Notification plan for policy CO 110. It's a localized project. We'll be posting information on the city's website and the traffic page, doing door-to-door visits and handouts to those businesses that are in very close proximity to the project. Approval for requests. We request that you authorize a construction contract with Main Lane Industries Ltd. in the amount of $1,246,675 for CIP WW 1804 Oyster Creek siphon replacement. With that, I'll answer clarifying questions.
Anyone? Steve?
Thank you, Mayor. Greg, when you say if we have to remove those bald cypress trees, we'll replace them, what would we replace them with?
They vary in size. They're up to, I think the largest one may be like 12-inch caliper tree, and the smallest is maybe a 3. I think we're going to go with somewhere in the middle, about an 8-inch caliper tree.
Okay. And it looks like you've got basically $100,000 between the budget and this bid, so you've got plenty of contingency to buy and plant the trees if you need to.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Carol?
Has Main Line Industries done any work for the city before?
Yes, ma'am. They are a local Houston-based company and has completed several successful projects here in Sugar Land before.
Great, thank you.
And Mr. Jeff Hevlin with Main Lane is here tonight.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve. Any other discussion? Vote at this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Thank you, Greg.
Yes, sir.
Item number 4B, consideration of an action on authorizing the execution of a construction contract with NG Painting LP in the amount of $779,065 for the rehabilitation of ground storage tanks number 2 and 3 at the Austin Parkway Water Plant, CIP WA 1903. and a budget amendment from the utility CIP fund balance in the amount of $105,000. Timothy John, our Assistant City Engineer. Timothy.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Yes, this evening we're seeking your approval for rehabilitation of ground storage tank contract and a budget amendment for this project. A little bit of project background. Our ground storage tanks are located at our groundwater plants, and they're used to store water for our peak flows, both on-site and utilized for storage of our blending of our ground and surface water. We have an annual groundwater tank rehab program. We typically design and then start construction in the same fiscal year if it works out. For this case, we did an inspection and evaluation for 3 tanks that were completed in November of 2018. We chose these tanks based on the annual groundwater program that we have identified through the 5-year CIP, and these were the 3 that were lined up. We moved forward with design, and that was completed in June of 2019. These 3 tanks are 2 of them are located at the Austin Parkway water plant. One's a 1.5 million gallon tank. The other one is 0.44 million gallon tank. And then the 3rd tank is at New Territory Ground Storage Tank. It's a 500,000 gallon. And we broke this up in the base bid, alternate 1 and alternate 2 for funding opportunities. This map shows, the general location. We have a Austin Groundwater Park ground storage tank is sort of in the heart of the city, and then our New Territory ground storage tank is to the very western edge of the city. Rehab of our ground storage tanks include, this is our standard list of projects. Scope identifies, we tank interiors, both the wet and dry spaces. We have coatings that we do, both the interior and exterior. If needed, we replace the roof rafters. Interior coating, interior piping as needed, we replace. There are certain appurtenances, ladders, and things that we look at. We also have grounds restoration, landscaping, and then some miscellaneous improvements that we try to cover for each project. This particular project advertised on June 26th and July 3rd. We did receive 9 bids on July 18th. And this is also in your agenda packet, but the bids were received here. The engineer's estimate, which I don't have in this slide, but the engineer's estimate for the base bid and 2 alternates was $1.2 million. We had a little bit challenge of the budget on this one. I'll explain in a minute, but the base bid, the recommendation is to go with NG Painting LP. The base bid is $569,065. Alternate 1 would be also at Austin Parkway. So these recommendations are for the Austin Parkway groundwater plant for a total of $779,065. We did have 9 bids, but 3 of them were non-responsive for various reasons. The funding needs for this, as I mentioned, $779,065. We expect a little bit of a contingency of $25,000. We do have some construction admin of nearly $22,000, so our total funding needs are just shy of $826,000. We have remaining funds in CIPW 1903 of $720,000, so we're requesting a budget amendment this evening for $105,000. So the notice to proceed, if this is approved this evening, would begin in September 2019, and we have 300 calendar days to complete the project. The construction impacts, this is all located on city property. We don't anticipate any water service interruptions. All the coating and blasting will be fully encased, and there will be some blasting noise. I would mention that this site is located on Austin Parkway, so it's not really in a residential area. We're next to Fort Bend ISD building, and I believe we're next to one of the city fire stations. So, but per policy, we will notify the neighbors via door hangers, mail outs, and one-on-one communications as needed. So, request for approval. The Engineering and Public Works Department recommends City Council authorize the execution of a construction contract with NG Painting for the rehab of ground storage tank number 2 and ground storage tank number 3 of the Austin Parkway plant. CIP WA 1903 in the amount of $779,065, and authorize a budget amendment from utility CIP fund balance in the amount of $105,000 to CIP WA 1903. And with that, I can answer any clarifying questions.
Carol?
Thank you, Mayor. About how long will the paint job and the rehabilitation of these last?
Well, the total contract is 300 days.
Oh, but I mean, how long is it good for? How long do you have to paint these?
Typically, I believe we're on a 5 to 7 year cycle. We have 26 ground storage tanks. Some of those we've inherited when we annexed Great Wood and New Territory. So depending on the conditions of those, when those are inherited, these are the ones that we are focusing on this evening, both Austin Parkway and New Territory.
Thank you. Motion to approve.
Got a motion by Councilmember McCutcheon. Go ahead a second. Steve, you got a question? Go ahead.
Did I hear you say that we had initially a $1.2 million available, our estimate for this project?
The estimate is $1.2 million.
So the base bid plus alternates 1 and 2 by NG Painting could have been afforded under that?
I'm sorry, let me go back to the...
Yeah. The next to the last column on the right, top row. So just remind me why if we thought it was going to be...
That was the engineer's estimate. It was not the available budget.
Okay.
That's, the engineer's estimate was, we had a $720,000 available funds. We wanted to see, we have not bid these size tanks in about 2 years, so we weren't sure of the available market condition. We were hoping that we'd be able to afford all three, depending on how the bids came in. But our recommendation is for the Austin Parkway, 2 tanks, and then the third location, we would capture that in the next CIP bidding project.
Okay, so we thought whatever the market might have changed so that we could basically cut 30% off the engineering estimate?
That's correct. When we bid 2 years ago, we had very favorable ground storage tanks numbers, and they came in very well. We have not bid anything to this size, at this level, so we were hoping that we would be able to get all three. In this case, we were recommending the base bid plus the alternate with a minor contract adjustment for budget.
One follow-up, Mayor.
Oh.
Tim, can you go back to the map?
Yes.
The New Territory ground storage tank, how far away from the Brazos River is that? Is that within the meander estimate that we previously looked at when we were looking at the Brazos River, or is it further away?
It's located actually within a lid, so it's protected by a levee.
Okay.
So the Brazos River impacts are not an issue.
All right. Okay, thank you.
I've got a motion. Do I have a second? I've got a second by Stuart Jacobson. Close this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Item number 5, bonds. 5A, consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land Resolution number 1928, authorizing publication of notice of intent to issue certificates of obligation. Jennifer Brown, our Director of Finance. Hey, Jennifer.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. All right, so we are here this evening to address the issuance of certificates of obligation for projects that are funded or will be funded within the fiscal year 20 budget. So each year, staff prepares a recommended capital improvement program that is required. The 5-year program is required by its city charter. The city manager recommends the first year as part of the annual budget. In the last citizen survey, 97% of our residents believe that Sugar Land is a great place to live, and part of that is the fact that the city is a good steward of their dollars. And so in order to do that, it requires us to continually reinvest into our facilities and infrastructure so that we can maintain that at a high level that is expected by our residents. So many times we get asked, why does the city issue debt for projects? Why don't you just pay cash? Isn't that more cost effective? But when you look at the size of our capital program, it's just not prudent for us to pay cash for projects. And so what we do is we look at the length of the life of the projects, and if it is rehabilitation related, we have now shifted a lot of that over into the operating budget, and we do pay cash for that. But when projects are a 20-year life, we want to spread the payments of the repayment of that project over the full life of the project, so that today's residents are not bearing the full cost of that, so that future generations are paying for their fair share. Share. I'll get my twang in there a little bit, my fair share. So that allows us to better allocate the resources to the highest priority projects by spreading that cost out. The city does carry the AAA bond rating for all of our tax-backed debt. We do not issue debt for maintenance or rehabilitation or operating expenses. We only issue debt for capital projects. And so because we have that AAA bond rating, that allows us to borrow money at the lowest possible interest rates. That, combined with our aggressive repayment schedule under our financial management policy statements, allows us to really minimize our interest costs. And so we have a policy that says we will pay off 50% of the principal within the first 10 years of a bond issue. We also match the repayment of the amortization of the principal to the project life. For example, the replacement of the city's enterprise resource planning system is one of the projects that we are funding, and rather than amortizing that over 20 years, we have a shorter amortization period for that. We have it over 10 years because that's not going to last as long as a street would, for example. So the proposed budget includes $17.8 million in projects funded through the issuance of certificates of obligation. $16 million of the $17.8 million will be funded from property taxes, and the $1.8 million is for the airport, and it will be repaid by airport revenue streams, as we reviewed in last week's budget workshop. And so the next few slides, just to remind you of what the projects are. I'm not going to read the slides, but they are consistent with what was filed in the budget and the CIP discussions that we've had with City Council. And you can see that $10 million out of the $16 million is directly street and drainage investments. But we want to make sure that we're not losing our forward momentum as we're going into fiscal year 20's budget, as we transition to the new strategy of going to the voters, as you called the GO bond election for November last week. And then the airport project is the replacement of a hangar that is required because of a taxiway relocation. So COs are very similar to general obligation bonds, except that they're not required to be approved by voters. They are allowed under state law, and state law requires that we take certain steps before issuing those. And the first step is City Council approval of a resolution stating our intent to issue the COs. We must publish that notice in the newspaper once a week for 2 consecutive weeks. The first notice must be published at least 31 days prior to the sale date. So with your approval of this item this evening, we will be publishing the first notice on August 28th. The second notice will be published on September 4th, and we're currently scheduling the sale for October 15th. And so we would be bringing back that sale for you that evening. We'll be competitively bidding the bonds during the day. The resolution that gets published must state the date and time and place for the ordinance to be adopted, the maximum amount and purpose for the bonds, and how they will be repaid. And so as we have discussed with City Council over the last, 6 or so months, feels like longer, but I've counted back to March, and it's actually only been about 5 or 6 months. So we were given the direction by City Council to do this issue of COs in fiscal year '20 as we shift over to the more regular GO bond programs. And so, while I'm not going to say we will never issue COs again, we will still continue to do that for like airport projects because the airport is going to sustain those and repay those, but you will see a lot less of that in the future. On the same date of October 15th, we're also planning to sell the remaining GO bonds from the 2013 authorization, around $10.26 million. We're also looking at refunding opportunities for some of the debt that we took on with the annexation of Greatwood and New Territory. We are getting to the window where those are becoming currently callable, and so actually reviewed with the Finance Audit Committee some opportunities that we have before us, as well as a Sugar Land 4B Corporation refunding opportunity. So all of that we are planning to do on October 15th. So I have a lot of work ahead of me, but we'd like to get started with that with the approval of this notice, this resolution this evening, which will trigger the publication of that notice. In September, we'll be having discussions with the rating agencies. I'll also be doing a workshop with the Sugar Land 4B Corporation Board to bring them up to speed, because it's been about, I want to say about 8 or 9 years since they've been involved in a refunding issue. So we've pretty much got a whole new board there to educate on the purpose of that. So all of that will be lined up. We'll have a special 4B meeting on the 15th and then be before you on the evening of the 15th of October. And delivery of funds in November, which gets us right inside that 90-day window for the refunding, but also gets us cash in the bank so that we can get our projects going for fiscal year '20. So, excuse me. The item before you this evening is Resolution 19-28, which authorizes publication of the Notice of Intent to Issue Certificates of Obligation on August 28th and September 4th, for the October 15th sale date, pending full approval by the City Council of the CIP and budget on September 17th. We can always issue less, but we need to get this notice published, and all of this would be pending approval by City Council of the budget. And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah,
The Settlers Way Drainage Project is Chris or Jesse? Oh, Chris, there you are. This is the project that the City Council discussed, making sure that we were able to move as quickly possible after the adoption of the budget?
Yes, sir, you're correct.
Okay. And so y'all are going to be ready with the money in the bank to begin moving forward on this project. What will be the first thing that will come from that? Will be a design or?
No, design's already underway, so
Okay.
engineering will be working to take it to
So
construction.
you'll
I believe, at the
literally
end of this
be
year.
looking at being ready to move to construction late this year or first part of the year?
First part of the year, we're currently at 60% design. We just had a review.
Excellent.
And probably next January, February, we're going to start construction.
Very good. Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
motion approved. I was asking for a motion to approve. So Ramesh, I'll move you up to approve. And I've got McCutcheon on the second. You vote at this time, please. And it's a 7-0 vote. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
I have a couple items.
Item number 6, ordinances, resolutions. You're back up. 6A, first and final consideration of and action on City of Sugar Land Ordinance Number 2175, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, amending the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget for the City of Sugar Land, Texas, to provide that the revised budget address funds relating to certain capital and operating budget matters, and that this amendment be adopted as the budgeted amount for those funds. Jennifer.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. All right, so we have wrapped up our budget discussions for the fiscal year 20 budget. But just to remind you that similar to what we'll do next month, the budget is adopted by one reading of an ordinance each year. And so throughout the year, similar to what you did earlier this evening, sometimes we ask City Council to approve additional appropriations from fund balance or from one-time funding. Some examples are when we do the carryovers after we finish the fiscal year for items that have not been completed, or after your retreat, we had some one-time funding where we did a budget amendment. And so those, rather than bringing forward an ordinance every time we need to ask you for a CIP amendment from fund balance, we pick those up and we'll do those 3 to 4 times a year. So the last one that we do is amending the budget to projections after we file the proposed budget. And so the objectives here are capturing any additional revenues and savings that we may have recognized throughout the budget process and creating a more accurate position of how we believe we're going to end the fiscal year. And so that also allows us to capture those budget amendments that have been approved by City Council throughout the year from the last time we amended the budget. Since we filed the budget, we have had some things be identified in fiscal year 19 where we have added money to projections for in the general fund. Our city manager search, we have that contract has gone out, so we want to make sure we have that contract funded. Additionally, we have election costs associated with the November bond election where we need to get that all set up with Fort Bend County. And then over the last 3 weeks or so, we've had quite a few property insurance claims that have come in that were a result of the May 7th rainfall event. We did have some significant vehicle damages, and so we've had payments of claims and deductibles that have come in where we have actually exceeded the original amount that we had allocated for those in the current year budget, and that is not going to be a reimbursable event. On the airport fund, as we discussed last week, we have removed the revenues from the reimbursement from TxDOT in fiscal year 19 for the West Side land acquisition. We are putting that out in the fiscal year 23 and 24 timeframe in the 5-year forecast. And then we have a couple of CIP amendments, for example, the one that you just reviewed earlier this evening. And I'm going to walk you through the CIP amendments at the end. But I do want to clarify that even with the delay in the reimbursement from TxDOT, in the projections, we will have fully repaid the $3 million interfund loan that was made in 2016 for the purchase of the land, formerly known as the Central Prison Unit, from the Surface Water Fund, which is now part of the Utility System Fund. So the Sugar Land Development Corporation and the airport will both be making their final payments in September, and that interfund loan will be repaid with interest according to the agreement. So just to recap some of the major operating funds. So these are the revised figures that are in the budget amendment. For the general fund, we are projecting to end with $95.03 million in revenues, $94.72 million in expenses, and we have a ending fund balance of $27.95 million, which is a 33% cash reserve. And those funds available over the fund balance are available, have been appropriated through the fiscal year 20 budget process as we reviewed during the budget workshops. On the...
Mr.
Mayor.
Yes.
Jennifer, go back one.
Okay. I think
one of the
I'm going
reasons,
backwards somehow.
again, make sure it's clear
Yes.
why we do this is you're showing ending the fiscal year 19 general fund budget with $3.98 million above the cash reserve requirement. Those dollars are being appropriated in the new budget, and what we're trying to do is to put them in the right place.
Yes.
For the council to act on at the budget and make sure that those, how we end this year and next year's beginning are in alignment.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mayor.
And this is a comparison to the current budget. So $3.98 million better off than our current budget anticipated. Our current ending fund balance is already at 28%, so we already have some one-time funding available there in the fund balance. And so all of that has been appropriated through the fiscal year 20 budget process. All right, so as I mentioned, the changes to projections were the recruitment, the bond election, and the insurance claims. We have gone ahead and added in the August sales tax payment because it did come in higher than we had projected, so why not make it as close to actuals as we can? So these figures do reflect the August payment, but we did not adjust the fiscal year 20 revenue budget. And so we're just treating this as a one-time revenue. And so in the general fund, we are ending the year, projecting to end the year better than anticipated. All right, so the debt service fund, we have $46.29 million in revenues, $43.84 million in expenses. This does reflect the refunding that was done earlier this year, and it also reflects the additional revenues that were transferred over into this fund from the Greatwood and New Territory debt reduction funds as we closed those out in fiscal year 19. And so pursuant to the strategic partnership agreement, that is the allowable use of those funds. And so that is why you really see us ending with $1.28 million more than we had budgeted, and that's because of the transfer of those funds. Those funds will then be utilized to pay debt service that was assumed by the city via the annexation. For the utility fund, as we reviewed last week, we have $62.1 million in revenues, $67.9 million in expenses, and we will be having an ending fund balance of $12.87 million, which is a 51% reserve. Now, this year we have experienced above average rainfall, as I showed you last week. So our revenues are coming in lower than anticipated. We do budget for an average year's rainfall, and when we prepared last year's budget, we only had a partial year data on our newly annexed residents' consumptions, and what we're seeing is that our residents are changing their behavior in that the citywide winter average, or the average usage for the months of January and February, is down about 500 gallons compared to what it was last year. And so what we're seeing is that we're not bringing in the revenue that we had anticipated originally. We also have expenditure savings as a result of not producing as much water, and so we were able to capture savings in both chemicals and electricity use, along with some operating savings, to almost nearly offset the additional water rights that were purchased or will be acquired in fiscal year 19. That contract, I believe, will be coming forward to you on September 3rd for approval. But the idea with the utility fund is that we're going to have wet years and we're going to have dry years, and you bank the funds in the fund balance during the dry years, so then during the wet years you can draw them down. Okay, so this is for the airport fund, and this does reflect the elimination or us taking out the funds from TxDOT. So with that, our revenues are going to be about $1.65 million under the current budget at $15.96 million. Our expenditures have not changed. We are increasing the projections slightly, as I reviewed last week, due to additional fuel for resale that is being run through the airport. That is the main way they make their money. And so the net income is minus $2.83 million. That is all because of drawdown of funds for one-time use for capital projects. They have a $2 million pay-as-you-go CIP in this year's fiscal year 19 budget. And so they weren't depending on the TxDOT funds for operations, and so they were already planning, as you can see, to draw down the fund balance by about $1 million. And so essentially what they're doing is just reducing their cash reserve, and that's all the TxDOT money is doing, is just paying back the funds that we used to acquire the land.
Ramesh?
So do we keep a
I think I know the answer is, we don't have a policy on cash reserves for this fund, right?
We do. It's 25% of operating expenses excluding fuel for resale.
Okay, so
So we have a very healthy cash reserve.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, so we're
82%.
well above that.
And we're still at 45% even with that, the TxDOT money not coming in this year.
Okay, thank you.
And so, as we reviewed last week during the workshop, we have pushed out the reimbursement in the 5-year forecast to fiscal year 23-24. This is consistent with the way TxDOT is showing it in their capital plan. They are wanting to tie those funds to the completion of the next phase of the taxiway relocation, which is currently being shown in fiscal year 22. So we will be monitoring this and engaging with TxDOT to make sure that we can get our money. But overall, the airport is performing better than expected. And like I said, they're not depending on that money for operations at all. And they'll be able to make their interfund loan payment in September as planned. So to summarize on the major operating funds, just the budgeted ending fund balances, they're all above the policy requirements. And while the utility fund and airport are lower than the original budget, I've been able to review with you the reasoning why. For the tourism fund, this is another area where we've seen revenues not coming in quite as anticipated, but in this fund, we have adjusted expenditures to be able to reduce and make sure that we're ending the fund, is ending the year as planned.
Reasoning behind the revenue projection being less due to less hotel occupancy, or is there some other factor that played into that?
What we're seeing overall is a lower than anticipated occupancy, and what we were seeing last fall was we were still kind of seeing some increases in the fiscal year 18, which would have been the fall of 2017, was the post-Harvey boost. And so we had built a growth in on top of that, but what we're seeing is the economy is not quite recovered, and so hotel occupancy isn't quite as high. But all of our hotels are still very healthy, and we do have another hotel coming online, I believe this fall, so we'll see some growth in fiscal year 20.
And is it accurate to say that the hotel revenue is a big piece of the tourism fund?
It is 100% of the revenue in this fund, other than the visitor center revenues.
All right, so it's pretty accurate statement.
Yes. Or I'd say 98% of the revenue for this fund, yes.
Thank you.
All right, so then just to touch on 3 internal service funds that we have increased the budgets on. We had some one-time items that we needed to come up to have replaced in both the fleet and technology replacement. So we did add some additional funds to projections. So what you'll see is our projected ending fund balance is slightly lower than what we had in the original budget, but that is exactly what those funds are designed to do. So we'd have the funds available to spend them when we need to spend them. And then on the employee benefits funds, we have adjusted both our revenues and expenditures to adjust for our claims year for plan year 2018, and we are anticipating aggregate stop loss reimbursement to come in fiscal year 19 to help reimburse for some of those claims. So the ending fund balance is actually ending up a little better off in this fund than the budget originally anticipated. So we have 2 more capital projects besides the one that you just saw a moment ago. Earlier this year, City Council approved the substantial amendment to the Community Development Block Grant Action Plan. And so while we had the funds budgeted in the CX Community Development Block Grant Fund, we did not add the funds to the Mayfield Park restroom project. So we are capturing that in the capital projects budget, as well as Williams Trace, the landscape or the irrigation portion of the Williams Trace project, where we had to rebid the landscape irrigation contract. They needed an additional $35,000 back from the $50,000 that they gave us earlier in the year. And so with that one, we've gone ahead and, since we'd already brought forward the action to give back the savings, we felt it was appropriate to clarify that we needed to add $35,000 back into this project. And that has already been approved by City Council as well. And then this was the ground storage tank item that you just approved earlier this evening. So we did review this item, although I have to admit I printed the wrong PowerPoint for finance audit, but I did talk about everything with them last week, and we did discuss the changes that were made to the projections since the budget was filed. The recommendation is to approve first and final reading of ordinance number 2175, amending the fiscal year 2019 budget to projections. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? I'll make a motion to approve. Got a motion, second by Porter. If you vote at this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Thank you, Jennifer. Before we move on to item number 7, Carol had reminded me we've got a scout in the audience. Kelly Kinake, I think you're back there. Is that your son?
No, it's not.
Okay. Can you have that scout stand up and talk about your badge and what you're here for?
I'm here for my communications merit badge. This is the last requirement that I have to complete. Attend a city council meeting and take notes.
There you are. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item number 7, public hearing, 7A, public hearing. It is after 6, so we're going to receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2020. And then we're going to have a consideration of and action on establishing a date for deliberation and adoption of the fiscal year 2020 budget. Jennifer, you're still here.
I'm still up. This is the last one for tonight. All right. So the local government code governs the municipal budget adoption process and requires, unless the city's charter has other requirements, it does require that we have one public hearing on the proposed budget. That public hearing has to be at least 15 days after the proposed budget is filed, and we have to publish notice at least 10 days before the hearing date, but not more than 30 days. And there is a statement on property taxes that must be included in the notice. So essentially, we've got to have a lot of information before we can have this happen. And so that statement on property taxes actually ends up on the cover page of the final budget that after you adopt it. The state also requires that while the budget is adopted by a simple majority, the budget has to be adopted prior to the tax rate. The tax rate, if it exceeds the effective tax rate, it requires a supermajority to pass, which is 5 out of 7 votes, or 60%. And then after all of that, you get to vote again to ratify the increase in tax revenues that you've approved in the budget and the tax rate. So that is what is to come. But this evening, we're here for the public hearing. And so just to summarize for the public who may not have sat through our 3 budget workshops, but I promise I will keep it short, this year's budget and CIP is the result of months of discussion between City Council and staff, and is focused on implementing the priorities that were identified as part of the Sugar Land Way earlier this year. The emphasis on is on those items that directly benefit residents and enhance the quality of life in Sugar Land, such as increasing funding for infrastructure rehabilitation, such as streets, sidewalks, facilities, parks, and drainage, and continuing our investment in technology to enhance traffic and mobility responsiveness, and supplementing our traffic safety resources. The budget also increases, or we did increase earlier this year, the residential homestead exemption in an successful effort to rebalance the tax burden between residential and commercial. And that will allow us to complete the remaining 2013 GO bond projects with minimal impacts to the residents' tax bills. The proposed budget was focused on the Sugar Land Way initiatives, really to address the constraint that had been placed on our services from prior years. And so, as I said, we're focusing on those services that have a benefit to residents, and also trying to address the legislative impacts that were put on, will be put on us with next year's budget. We want to be able to put our operating budget in the best possible position moving forward, as the 3.5% revenue cap or tax rate limitations will be in place for next year's budget. So we have in the budget, we have strategic additions that we've added, that we reviewed with you through the budget workshops to get our services back in alignment with the Sugar Land Way, along with increasing our funding for infrastructure rehabilitation, which we do pay for in cash. The budget is built with property tax revenues that worked out to the tax rate of 33.2 cents, with the residential exemption of 12%. And we've built in our sales tax revenue consistent with the financial management statement policy direction. And as you'll see, as we bring forward the fee ordinance to you in September, we have some targeted fee increases to help us offset some of those legislative impacts, along with increases to our water, wastewater, and sewer surface water rates. It has been a significant amount of time. It's been since 2014 since our surface water rates were adjusted, and since 2011 since our water and wastewater rates were adjusted. And with the mandated 60% groundwater reduction just outside our 5-year window, we need to really start investing in some capital improvements to help us meet that mandate. And then for our solid waste, there will be a 2.5% increase, which is passing on the contractual rates from Republic Services. On the expenditure side, we have built in the funding in our base budget to meet our base operating needs, which mainly is just contractual increases. We have funded all of our existing personnel costs with a merit pool, budgeted at 3% of salaries, although the individual awards are given to employees based on their individual performance. There's no guarantee of getting a merit increase. The city does not give cost of living increases or longevity pay adjustments. So the budget also includes the 7% increase that we have included for the city's contributions to benefits costs. And then I've talked about the Sugar Land Way additions and infrastructure already. So this is an overview of the total budget. This is as the budget was filed in July by the city manager. The budget totaled $272.1 million, and here you can see the distribution of that, with 36% of that funding the general fund, which is the main, what you think of as the main governmental function of the city. Capital projects that are being funded are $40.5 million, and that includes both the general CIP and the parks bond projects and the utility and airport CIP. So with the proposed tax rate, the average residential tax bill based on the average value in the city would be $1,096 for 2019, and that is only a $24 increase compared to the 2018 tax bill. So while the tax rate shows the nominal tax rate is a 4.5% increase, the residential homestead exemption offsets that and nets to a 2.23% impact. And so I mentioned a moment ago the water and wastewater utility rates, and those will work out to about a $5 a month impact for a customer that uses about 12,000 gallons in a month. And if you have a customer that uses 3,000 gallons of water in a month, the impact drops to about $2 per month. And the solid waste rates will become $19.38 per month in January of 2020. And so just to break down the proposed budget by fund, this is the numbers behind the chart that I showed you just a moment ago. And so we have held 3 Thursday morning budget workshops, and then we also reviewed with you the capital improvement program in some evening workshops during the month of July. And the remaining dates we have for budget-related actions would be the first reading of our user fee and PID assessment ordinances on September 3rd, with adoption of the budget and tax rate slated for September 17th. And the recommendations this evening are for you to hold a public hearing. We did place the opportunity online for comment through our online comment tool, I guess. We did receive no input through that medium, and so I'll ask you to open the public hearing, and then once we are done with the public hearing, we'll need council to take action to place the item on the September 17th agenda for consideration.
So Jennifer, to summarize what we did, we increased the homestead exemption from 10% to 12%. And we did that in order to offset the increase in the tax rate from 0.31762 to 0.332, which was an increase of about 1.4 cents. In all that, that's what you should take away on the tax rate for that. So at this time, we're going to open the public hearing to hear anybody that would like to comment on the budget and the tax rate for fiscal year 2020. No one approached the podium on the first call. We'll go to the second call. We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and we're going to move to establishing a vote. So we're going to be voting now to place the item on the September 17th of this year agenda, at which time we'll take up approving the budget and a tax rate to fund that budget. I'll make the motion to do that.
Second.
Got a motion, I've got a second. Any other questions? You vote this time, please. There we go, and it passes 7-0. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Item number B, public hearing, receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed amendment to the master thoroughfare plan by adopting an update to the City of Sugar Land Master Thoroughfare Plan map. And we've got Tim John. Tim. And Karen Baugh is also.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Karen Baugh with the Long Range Planning Division. Tonight, Tim John and I would be presenting to you an amendment to the Master Thoroughfare Plan. Just a brief outline of the presentation. First, I'd review just the history of the Master Thoroughfare Plan and provide a background on the last update. And then Tim will follow with a review of the updates to the map, and then we'll hold a public hearing. So the Master Thoroughfare Plan is one of the city's 8 official master plans, and the master plans are elements of our comprehensive plan. They provide policy directions, and the thoroughfare plan was last updated in 2012. These are a process of which we regularly update and maintain the comprehensive plan, and this is part of the Sugar Land Way. The Master Thoroughfare Plan also looked at major infrastructure improvements that have occurred since the last update in 2012. So the 2012 Master Plan update for the Thoroughfare Plan looked at mainly short and long-term growth impacts in the city and from the region. The comprehensive update to the city's major street networks included major and minor collectors, arterials, state highways, and freeways. Tim, in his presentation, would go through each of these. The Comprehensive Mobility Plan that was adopted in 2011 also identified additional needs for an update to the plan. So tonight, the 2019 plan amendment will focus mainly on the map changes. And it's as a result of development and redevelopment within the city limits and within the city's ETJ, and changes that were made to the city's road network system. That's the focus of tonight's amendment. These changes were also based on the Master Thoroughfare Plan annual report recommendations. Each year we review the master plans through the annual reports, and they recommended a change was required to the map of the Master Thoroughfare Plan. And the map reflects changes that were previous decisions by council. I will then turn over the rest of the presentation to Tim.
Thank you, Kieran. Mayor and council members, appreciate the opportunity to give you an update of our maps for our thoroughfare plan. So what we have here is on the left is the 2012 Master Thoroughfare Plan that was been in existence since that time. And on the right is the proposed 2019 Master Thoroughfare Plan. The whole point of this exercise this evening is really just to talk about the map changes. As Kieran mentioned earlier, we have talked about all the changes that I'll go through the annual reports. They've been written and verbalized, but we've never really memorialized any of these changes in a map. So the idea is to do the amendment this evening for amending the map. One thing I'd like to point out is comparing the two is since 2012 we have annexed some areas, and so we've changed the thoroughfare plan map city limits to include both Greatwood and New Territory. The other thing that we're trying to emphasize more, as mentioned in Kieran's previous slide, is the thoroughfare plan really is minor and major collectors, arterials, freeways forward. It has really nothing to do, it's not too involved with local streets. So you could consider the minor collectors up as being the veins and arteries of the street system, and really the local roads are the capillaries. We're not too concerned about those with the thoroughfare plan. So in order to compare the 2012 master plan to the 2019 proposed, I've created these viewports, views 1 through 8, because viewing it in a big picture, you wouldn't be able to see the detail. So I've created these views 1 through 8, and the first one we're actually going to focus on is view 8, which is the table of contents. And what we have is the existing roadways and future roadways. This was shown in the previous 2012 thoroughfare plan, no big changes there. I just want to mention that a freeway, this is the classification of the freeways, they're major roads and they have full control access with no grade crossings. And our freeways within our Sugar Land area is US 59/I-69. That's our only freeway in the area. The next layer down is our state highways, and that would be Highway 6 is one of our major state highways. They go through Highway 6. And the difference is that those state highways and freeways, really, they're about moving people and goods at the regional, statewide, and national level. So those are kind of and those are also funded by the Federal Highway Administration improvements and TxDOT, and state highways and the freeways are managed mostly by TxDOT. Then you get into the next hierarchical listing is arterials, major collector and minor collector, and then other is what we call the local roads. Your arterials are really is where the network within the city itself, and those are the roads that carry large volumes of traffic long distances through the city. And as I go through these maps, I'll show you examples of what's an arterial versus a minor major collector. As you get into these major minor collectors, the differences are really kind of subtle. It really has to do with, like a major collector would connect an arterial to an arterial. It may also provide access to development, and it's not intended to carry the same amount of traffic over longer distances. It's really about shorter distances for connectivity. And your minor collector is even one step below that. Again, it's generally minor collectors are similar roadways and elements of a little bit bigger than local streets. They typically can be 2 lanes with or without a median, and they sometimes have more frequent occurring driveways and allowed on-street parking. The other item that we added to this legend now is roundabouts. In our previous master plan, roundabouts were not really incorporated in that, but as you know, we have a lot of roundabouts in the city, so we've added that to the legend as both existing and future roundabout. So the views that I mentioned here, just go through these 7 views for the city. And some of these views, I've kept the scale the same, so they may be redundant, they may overlap. There may be some areas where the identified infrastructure is shown twice, so I'm not going to go through them in each one, but it gives you an idea of what we're looking at. So view 1 is the northern part of the city. And number 1 is we added, there's a future roundabout at Stadium Drive and Main Street. That was identified a while back with the development of the Imperial Track 3, and that's identified to be a future roundabout. And then the other item that was changed, and what I'm identifying here is what's changed from 2012 to 2019. So what has changed is number 2 is the completion of Crown Garden Trail. The previous version actually showed it as proposed. Now it's actually been completed by the developer. Going to view 2, I've talked about items 1 and 2 already, so I won't repeat that. But going for items 3, 4, and 5, there is an existing roundabout within the Imperial Track 3, so we have shown that here at Stadium Drive. We also completed in the last 2 years the South Stadium Drive over Oyster Creek, so that was shown here as well. We have a future roundabout at Main Street in Kempner, and then a while back you may recall that we had closed Wood Street crossing at Highway 90A per UP Railroad requirement. So those are the items for view 2. Going on to view 3, it's more central east of the city. I've already talked about items 1, 4, and 5, so there's nothing really new added here to show you. But to give you an example of the classifications that I mentioned earlier, US 90A is one of our freeways, a state highway, and then US 59 would be a freeway. Some of the items shown in green here are your minor collectors, and then maybe in blue are the major collectors. So this is the network system that we're talking about. And we've labeled those streets on as where we could practical. We're not labeling the local streets in this case. Going on to view 4, this is quite a few of changes that we have listed here. Number 6 is a future roundabout extension of Soldiers Field Drive, and that is one of our GO bond projects that will be coming up for vote in November. Items 7, 8, 9, and 10 are actually just completion of these roadways. They actually were there proposed. All we did was just complete them by the developer, completed those areas, so we show this as being completed. Number 11, that came out through negotiations with for Track 5. We're recommending that be a minor collector. It's basically an extension of Lexington Boulevard over to University. So we're recommending that stay in the thoroughfare master plan. Number 12 is an existing roundabout at Lexington and Oxbow. We included that here. And then number 13 is also an existing roundabout at Arden Oaks and Savannah Heights Drive. And as an example here, the new Terry Boulevard is shown in black. That would be considered an arterial, so that gives you an example of what different classifications of the roadways. Going on to view 5, I've already talked about 6 and 12, so that's nothing new to discuss here. Again, here's a better example of view 5. It's sort of south and east city view. This area shows quite a few arterials. We have Lexington, we have Austin Parkway, Lexington Boulevard that I mentioned, Sweetwater Boulevard, and those connect. Those are really the network system within the city that does a lot of volume throughout our city network. View 6 is on the southern part of the city in Greatwood. We've actually completed the portion of Magnolia Trail that was actually in the city's ETJ, so we show that as an improvement in View 6. Finally, with View 7, we completed the added roundabout at LJ Parkway and Commonwealth. That was completed about 4 years ago. And then items 16, 17, 18 are really just completion of these roadways. Again, they were shown as proposed. These are now being completed. So one thing I like to say is really all we're really is just solidifying the changes from the 2012 master plan. There haven't really been that many changes to the master plan itself. The annual reports, again, describe what these changes were. We just wanted to put these in a mapped format so it can be memorialized for future consideration. We did go to Planning and Zoning for a public hearing for consideration action on June 11th. We did not receive any public feedback. The Commission unanimously approved the support of the City Council with recommended changes. I had failed to include the Imperial Market Main Street. It was an oversight on my part, but P&Z was did their part and they pointed that out. And they had also had a few questions about some traffic safety related to existing roundabouts, and they had wanted to make sure that we were confident in moving forward with roundabouts, future projects, and we are confident with the information that we've gathered in the traffic data, and we're comfortable with moving forward with those recommendations. So tonight, the process would be to hold a public hearing, and then after the public hearing, we can answer questions, and then you would approve the first reading of ordinance number 2167, adopting the amendment of the Master Thoroughfare Plan map, and then the second reading would be anticipated for September 3rd. And Kieran can answer any questions after the public hearing.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. At this time, we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing on the Master Thoroughfare Plan. If you'd approach the podium, name, address, and comments. Anyone? First call. Second call. We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. We're going to move to item number B, first consideration. Consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land. Ordinance number 2167, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, amending the Master Thoroughfare Plan, an element of the City of Sugar Land Comprehensive Plan by adopting an update to the map. Any questions of Karen or Tim? Jennifer.
What were the safety recommendations from Planning and Zoning?
It wasn't a recommendation, it was a concern about safety and driving and drivers weaving in and out of the lanes, et cetera, basically roundabout education. They just wanted to ensure, I think one or two particular council members, P&Z members, liked a particular roundabout and was unfavorable at another one. So they were just concerned about traffic operation. But since that time, and since the roundabouts have been built, Public Works has been monitoring. There's been public outreach. There's been changes as needed to markings and signage, et cetera. And so we've not because of P&Z, but it has been continue education with these roundabouts, and we continue that today.
Okay, thank you.
Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Tim, can we go to view 2?
Yes.
Item number 1 there.
Yes.
what does this mean, this green dot? Does that mean at some point we
It's a
think
feature.
somebody's going to convert that intersection to a roundabout?
That's correct.
It was originally in the plan, I thought, and as I understood from the developer, there was not enough room there to build that roundabout, so we ended up with Stadium Drive teeing into Bernie rather than Bernie continuing on to Stadium Drive and having to stop and make a left turn to go down Main Street. So is the city thinking we're going to build this roundabout?
I believe the developer, that would be, when the thresholds are met, that would be a development agreement requirement. And we would just have to work out the geometrics of the area. That was the recommendation in the approved PD for that development.
And the developer, that's an actual requirement on this developer?
Yes, sir. That was approved. It was in the traffic impact analysis. That was part of the approved PD for this development. And we had received public input as well on this particular geometric layout, and it was favorable.
So how did he end up building this T rather than a roundabout?
Well, they haven't met the threshold yet. There was a threshold of traffic volume, and that development hasn't fully developed yet.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Where are we now relative to the threshold?
We're probably maybe 60 to 70% of the development. There's still some commercial and office development left in Imperial Tract 3 as well.
Yeah, but I'm not sure it's going to put that kind of traffic on that road. Do you count in this threshold all the traffic that's generated by baseball games and special events at Constellation?
Typically, no. The baseball games, et cetera, that's really a statistical anomaly. I mean, it's really hard to design around those peak type of events. This is really meant for just the normal traffic volume generated out of businesses and residential in the area.
Well, yeah, I guess my request would be to look again at what's going on at that intersection.
Sure.
There's a lot of baseball games, a lot of special events, and in the morning and evening, people queue up both north and southbound to try to make that turn, either coming out. That's a problematic intersection, and if we could do a roundabout, I think it would improve the level of service on those roads significantly. I don't know what it would take to do that, but I don't know how we would just say the peak flow doesn't count. I know there's a lot of exits out of Constellation, and that was planned, but that intersection is, I'm just excited that that's a possibility.
Sure.
What would have to happen to consider the peak flow as part of that threshold?
I'll ask James Turner to address that.
Good evening, sir. Typically, we would do a warrant analysis. So we would look at we would measure the volumes, kind of look at a whole week possibly, and then we would do a warrant. So we would do a study in short and see if that has met several criteria to warrant a roundabout or a countermeasure to help the level of service at that intersection.
When was the last time we did a study at that intersection?
Probably when the TIA was done. We have not received any concerns that I've heard, but we're welcome to do it and see what it looks like today.
Councilman, if you would like to make that request, then I think you can make that request right now.
Yeah, of my colleagues, I would appreciate looking at that intersection.
I don't think it takes a vote of council, Steve. I think all you have to do is just make the request.
We'll take a look at
James, why don't you go ahead and do the warrant analysis to determine if it warrants a different level of...
We'll look at accidents as well, see if there's any concerns.
Yeah, and you may want to follow up with the developer because the the person that worked for the developer that was in charge of that development told me the reason they did what they did was there was not enough room.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor.
Kara?
Thank you, Mayor. To follow up Councilmember Lane's question, have two-lane roundabouts have a higher accident rate than single-lane roundabouts, or they're about the same? And how many do we have that are two-lane roundabouts? I know the one at Stadium Drive at Imperial is a two-lane.
Yes, that's the only two-lane roundabout we have. Sorry, two-lane roundabout we have at Imperial. They have shown more accidents. We've had 12 accidents since from 2015 to 2018, but only 2 of those were in 2018. So we're always looking to correct any issues or concerns that we see. Recently, we've been trying to correct some striping there, but we have not seen anything since March of 2018.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a motion? Got a motion by McCutcheon. Do I have a second? Second. I've got a second by Kermally. You vote this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. Item number 8, appointments. 8A, consideration of an action on appointments of city council members to standing committees for 1 year expiring May of 2020. The standing committees are Finance and Audit, myself, Jacobson, and Kermally. Intergovernmental Relations, myself, Lane and Jacobson. Compensation Committee, myself, Lane and Gandhi. Economic Development, myself, Porter out of 4B, Lane out of SLDC. Do I have a motion to approve? Second. Got a motion by Jacobson, second by Gandhi. You vote this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Item number B, consideration of an action on appointment of 1 member and 1 alternate to the Houston Galveston Area Council General Assembly, and appointment of 1 member and 1 alternate to the Houston Galveston Area Council Transportation Policy Council for a 1-year term expiring May of 2020. The primary will be myself for the General Assembly and Board of Directors. The alternate will be Kermally. On the HGAC Transportation Policy Council, I'll be the primary. Lane will be the alternate. A motion to approve? Got a motion by Porter, second by Kermally. You vote this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. Item number C, consideration of an action on appointment of 1 member to the Sugar Land 4B Corporation Board of Directors to fill an unexpired term ending September the 30th of 2019. On the 4B, we've got an appointment of Kermally to serve until 9/30 of 2019. Got a motion by McCutcheon, second? Second by Lane. Vote this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Item number D, consideration of an action on appointment of 1 member to Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 3, Board of Directors, Position 1, to fill an unexpired term ending December 31st of 2019, and appointment of 1 member to Position 2 to fill an unexpired term ending December 31st of 2020, and appointment of a chair to fill the unexpired term ending December 31st of 2019. TERS 3, we've got Jacobson until 12/31/2021. Councilman Porter will become the chair, and Councilman Gandhi for a term 12/31 to 2020. Motion? A motion by Jacobson, second by Kermally. Vote this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Item number E, consideration of an action on appointment of one member to the Board of Directors of the Sugar Land Heritage Foundation to fill an unexpired term ending June 30th, 2020, and appointment of one member to the Board of Directors of the Sugar Land Heritage Foundation to fill an unexpired term ending September 30th of 2020. For the Heritage Foundation, council member will be Councilmember Lane. For staff, it'll be Assistant City Manager Doug Brinkley, who is a staff appointee. Motion to approve. Got a motion by Councilmember McCutcheon, second. Second by Porter. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. Item number F, consideration of an action on 2 appointments to the First Colony Management District Board of Directors for a 4-year term expiring June 1st, 2023. We've got Elizabeth Huff. I think I'm here for Elizabeth on this. And we've got for the First Colony Management District Board of Directors, we have Kim G. for position 8 and John Beard for position 9. Motion to approve. Got a second by Porter. You vote at this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Item number 9, workshop, review of and discussion on the process for the 2019 recruitment and appointment on boards and commissions. Our own Carrie Paxton Lamke, Community Engagement Manager. Carrie.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, and Mr. Bogard. I'm here to facilitate a workshop this evening and to receive guidance on how City Council wishes to proceed in filling vacancies for the city's boards and commissions. To provide you an overview, City Council annually appoints residents to serve on various boards and commissions which exercise a number of advisory and quasi-judicial powers and functions essential or useful to the operation of city government. If vacancies occur within boards and commissions, the positions may be filled with a current list of applicants using the appointment process delineated in Council Policy 3000-09, Resolution 15-24, or through recruitment for interested volunteers. The timeline going forward for this process is as follows. If you all decide this evening to open up applications, they will open tomorrow, August 21st, and we will be open for 3 weeks, closing on September 11th. September 13th, I will provide an FYI to you all with the applicant information, and then on September 19th or 25th, we will have City Council interviews if you decide to interview any of the applicants. On October 16th thereafter, they will take their, after you make some decisions, the official oath of appointees or official oath of office for the appointees or reappointments, and the ceremonial oath and ethics training will occur on November 5th. Now, to get started, we're going to address the advisory boards here. An advisory board serves as an ongoing forum for providing public input to the City Council and appropriate department, providing them with advice on issues. Advisory boards are not authorized to make decisions on behalf of the city. The City Council will consider input from the advisory boards as well as from other sources in making decisions on issues. The City Council may or may not take action that is in agreement with the advice of an advisory board. Advisory boards may not speak for the city or take independent positions on issues with the public or the press. The purpose of the boards is only to advise the City Council or the appropriate department. Please note in your binder that is provided to you, we have feedback from each of the chairs behind the tab from each of the advisory boards. And that is in regards to the board's participation and attendance, and in addition to attendance information on each member that you'll see behind the tabs. The first board that we will address is the Animal Advisory Board. The purpose of the Animal Advisory Board is to review and recommend procedures for the care and maintenance of animal shelter facilities and impounded animals to ensure compliance with state law and to periodically review the city animal control ordinances and make recommendations for revisions. The Animal Advisory Board members serve one term. There are currently 9 members. We have 0 vacancies this year. All members are interested in reappointment, being considered for reappointment. And so the steps following, you have the choice to either reappoint the current board. You may decide to open new applications. Now, in this situation, the last applications that were open or available were in 2017. For the Boards and Commissions program, you are allowed to consider applicants from going back a year. So if you decide to, in this situation, you would have to open new applications if that is your choice. You may also decide a further step in conducting interviews. Okay. Now for the Parks Board. The Parks Board, okay.
You want to have questions on this particular
Okay.
board? So any comments, questions on this board from council? All right. Nasha.
Just not having any background, sorry. Not having any background, I just noticed that our chair's been since 1997
For the Animal Advisory Board?
on the animal advisory.
Chair's really required to be a doctor, a veterinary doctor.
1997.
So it's required under the ordinance to be a veterinarian, be a doctor. So it's a fairly rigid requirement. And Dr. Cox, to be perfectly honest, has been pretty extraordinary in giving of his time since.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or direction from council on this board? This is workshop, so.
Yeah,
it's
Mr.
just
Mayor, it's my
really-
understanding
really
that it is
questions.
staff's intent to reach a conclusion tonight as to whether or not any, whether you want to consider any changes to this board or whether you would be satisfied with reappointment.
Yes.
Because otherwise, we need to begin advertising.
Right. What's your preference? Reappoint?
I would say keep the board as it is.
Okay. Anyone else? Anybody disagree? Yes, sir.
Included in this tab is a comment from the chair suggesting there should be some limit on attendance. How would that be addressed? Can the board itself do that, or it's typically we have made that a policy in the past, right?
Carrie, who's the board liaison with this?
Stacy or Chris?
Stacy, can you come up, please?
Yes, sir. The city does have a policy. I can't recall the number of it off the top of my head at the moment, but we do have a policy that limits the number of absentees a board member can have.
Yeah, what he said, Steve, I'm reading the email, it says it seems to be resolving itself. So, I mean, what we can ask is, Stacy, why don't we go, through mid-year? I don't think a quarter's enough time. And then if there's an attendance issue, what we normally do is I'll contact that person and see if there's some outstanding, I mean, many times it's parents, kids, something impacting somebody's schedule, and they get back on track and everything's fine. So
Okay.
why don't we just take another look at it in 6 months?
Mayor,
Ramesh?
this is a workshop that we can
Workshop items somewhat broadly. One concept to maybe think about, I don't know how the council would feel about it, but, one of the ballot items that we were going to put on for council members was removal of council members for unexcused absences after a certain number of missed meetings. One concept may be that you apply that same standard to your boards and commissions, that if you have, a certain number of unexcused absences, then it's an automatic removal, and you would apply that across the board.
Cindy, would you like to address that?
Yes, hi, Cindy Dees, Director of Public Affairs. So in your current policy, there is actually a rule, if you have more than 3 unexcused absences, it's considered automatic resignation. And then, of course, at any time, council can remove or replace members of any board or commission. So that's completely up to you. But there is already a rule about the 3 in a row.
Everybody go to forward. What's the next one, Carrie?
So just to reiterate, you are choosing to reappoint the Animal Advisory Board. Thank you. The Parks Board's purpose is to provide input, feedback, and advice on projects and programs to enrich the visual and aesthetic environment of the city and to advise on other matters relating to long-term goals and objectives for parks, recreation, and cultural activities, streetscape, and urban forestry programs to ensure an environment where all citizens could share and enjoy the full diversity and vitality of the park system. The Parks Board members serve 1 term. There are currently 9 members. All members are interested in reappointment. You have the following steps that you can follow. You may either reappoint the current board, you may open new applications, although currently we have 8 applications that were received in April of 2019 when you all interviewed for a vacancy on the Parks Board at that time.
Yes, Stuart.
Having served on the Parks Board for several years and knowing this group, it's a group, it's a team actually. It's not just a group, it's a team. And I would recommend that we reappoint everyone.
And that's what Barbara Brushin, who's the chair, she gives some very high comments to her team. So anybody have any problem with reappoint? Okay, Carrie.
Okay, thank you. Now on to the Sugar Land Legacy Foundation. The Legacy Foundation promotes community investment in facilities and activities that enhance the long-term prosperity and quality of life of Sugar Land residents. The Sugar Land Legacy Foundation vacancies may be filled by a straight appointment. There are 9 members. They serve a 2-year term. We have 1 vacancy this year. There are continued efforts to grow the board to 15 members as allowed in the bylaws. And those citizens identified prior to appointments will be included in the current appointment process. The remaining growth of the board is to be addressed separately.
And Daphne and I had a chance to host this board at a Skeeters game, and they are almost everybody showed up with their spouse. They are very close. They have some thoughts on other members that they'd like to appoint. Who is the liaison with this board? Is that Daphne?
Daphne, yes.
Let's let Daphne reach out to the board and have the board come back to us, because it's important, because of the nature of the board, that they're comfortable with whoever would be appointed. So let them come back with a recommendation to us, and then we'll consider that recommendation or recommendations.
Okay, thank you. And the fourth board that we will address this evening in open session is the Independent Ethics Review Board. The rules of ethical conduct apply to city officials such as city council members and appointed board members. The rules cover topics such as conflicts of interest, disclosure of gifts, restrictions on political activity and contributions, participation in procurement and campaign activity. The Independent Ethics Review Board reviews alleged violations to the rules of ethical conduct. There are 7 members and 2 alternates. They serve a 2-year term. This year we have 1 vacancy, and we have 15 applications on file that can be reviewed. You may reappoint the current board. You may review current applications or open new applications, and you also have the option to conduct interviews.
And Carrie, I think with regard to this board, we have 2 alternates.
Yes.
What we've always done in the past is we've moved one of the alternates up, and then we've selected from someone else to replace that alternate. Is that your preference? Okay, that's what we'll do, Carrie.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Carrie, I would assume then that we would be advertising for an alternate, or are we going to fill from the applications, 15 applications that you already have?
I think we go through the 15 applications and select from that.
Okay.
Okay.
Meredith, you got?
I'm sorry, these are staggered 2-year terms, and because you just appointed this board last year, you have some that are 1-year terms that need to be reappointed. So you actually have a vacancy and 2 to be reappointed. So if you're moving the alternate up, you would actually still need to decide if you want to replace the current person who's on a 1-year term and how you want to replace the opening.
So the action then is to reappoint the one that is coming up and then have a discussion about moving one of them up.
So reappoint the 2 that are on the board now, move one alternate up and keep the other one.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Now, if you look behind your tab, you'll see the scores from the past interviews or applicants. You also have the ability to interview those on the list.
Talking about the spreadsheet, Carrie.
Sorry?
Spreadsheet.
I'm referring to a tab behind the Ethics Review Board
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
information in your binder.
No, got it.
At the top, it says weighted sum, and you'll see those who were selected, and those below that were also applicants, and we still have those applications on file to go back a year.
I mean, Barbara would fill the role as an alternate?
That would be up to you all if you would like to consider past applicants, yes.
Stuart?
When did you say these interviews took place? How long ago was this?
I'm going to ask Meredith for assistance on that.
A year. Okay, thank you.
So the question of the council right now is we have one vacancy. We have 2 alternates. We've got Frederick Kellerman, Amy Bergman, that are alternates. What's your preference on moving one of those up to replace Councilman Kamali?
Let's go by the score.
Next 24. So Frederick Kellerman would then move up.
No. Amy would move up.
The name above it would, yes, Amy would.
Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay, so we're going to move Amy up to replace Kamali. And then what's your preference for selecting the next alternate?
Mayor?
Yes.
Amy is currently on the board as an alternate, and her term has not expired.
Okay. That doesn't mean that we can't move her up.
That's correct. These are 3-year terms, and so she has at least 1-year term left, but you can move her up and change her appointment. Yes, sir.
We just move her up and change her appointment. Correct, which the discussion then is,
10 would move up.
is,
Would be an alternate.
who would that be?
Number 10.
See, I don't know where you're reading that from. Oh, I see now, yeah. So everybody okay with moving Barbara up into the alternate spot?
Yes.
Okay. Carrie?
Okay,
Now that I finally see the weighted sum.
thank you.
Okay.
And that's all I have now. I am happy to answer any questions.
Anyone? Great binder, Kerry. All right, we're going to move to item number 10, City Council City Manager Report. Uh, 10A, City Council Member Reports. Stuart, we'll start with you.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, Ramesh?
Just one major event that you're...
You were at, along with Councilmember Lane and myself, was the 73rd Independence of India celebration at the Stafford Center. I thought it was well attended, and I thought Sugar Land had a good representation there. So,
thank you, Mitch. Carol.
We met with additional Sweetwater residents on drainage, and I hosted a traffic aware at the Smart Financial Center, and council members Kermali Lane and I attended the Aga Khan Foundation banquet.
Hey, Carol. Nashed.
Nothing to report.
Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Attended the Sugar Land Heritage Foundation Friends event honoring Sugar Land veterans. They've done an awful lot of work. There's some displays in the museum, and I would encourage anybody to go by the museum and take a look at all the veterans that have represented Sugar Land. The mayor, myself, and our IGR manager hosted Fort Bend County at Constellation Field, and we attended Covington Woods annual HOA meeting. The community engagement people had a cast of thousands there. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody on staff that gave their evening to that. And upcoming is Fort Bend Mayor and City Council Members Association meeting this week.
Thanks, Steve. Jennifer.
Mine have been covered. I hosted the Sugar Land Heritage Foundation group at the Skeeters ball game on Friday.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just one thing. Kelly, recognized Kelly Kinnick. He's the president of the Covington Woods Community Association, the HOA. We attended, Steve and I attended that meeting. Good discussion on the GO bonds. At this time, we're going to move, Alan.
No report.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Member.
Oh, yeah. Where is he? Oh, there he is. I see him. I'm sorry. Councilman Don Smithers from District 1, our former council member. Hey, Don. Thanks for coming tonight. Item number 11, closed executive session. 11A, closed executive session is authorized by Chapter 551 Texas Government Code in accordance with Section 551074 Public Officers. And item number B, closed executive session is authorized by Chapter 551 Texas Government Code in accordance with 551071 consultation with attorney, and we'll adjourn into the council dining room.